Please, delighted you're all here for the 51st annual meeting of the Loon Preservation Committee. We are 50 years old, so let's begin the meeting by acknowledging that we're starting our 51st year, and some of you may be able to join us at the 100th anniversary. I'd like a motion to approve the minutes of last year's annual meeting.
So moved.
Have the minutes been distributed? Holly?
That's okay. You can know.
No, don't. If they're not before us, we could do it subsequently. Let's move forward to ask the chair of our governance committee and the incoming chair of this organization, Brenda Stowe, to introduce the officers and ask for your vote on them. Brenda?
Thank you, Bob. My name is Brenda Stowe. I am the incoming chair of the Board of Trustees and would also like to introduce our new vice chair of the Board of Trustees, Charlie Nims, who is right here, and our treasured returning treasurer, Bob Varney, in the back. So that is our slate of officers. We have 6 trustees who are up for renomination to the board this year. We have 1 new trustee and we have 1 retiring trustee. Renomination to their 3rd term. And I'm going to ask for the members to please give me a motion to renominate these people. And then we would like a second. So the first one is myself, Brenda Stowe. Can I have a motion to renominate me to the board? And a second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for that. The next trustee is Jeff Patterson. He could not be with us tonight, but he too is up for renomination to a 3rd term. I have a motion to renominate. Thank you. And a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The 3rd person is Susan Goodwin. Susan is right here. She is also up for her 3rd term as a trustee. Can I have a motion to nominate Susan?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second? Thank you for that. And all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Bob Varney, our treasurer, is also up for his 3rd term. Can I have a motion to renominate Bob?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second? All those in favor of renominating Bob Varney? And the last one who also could not be here tonight is Dave Govatsky. He is also up for renomination to his 3rd term. Can I have a motion to renominate Dave?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And then we have 1 other trustee up for renomination to their 2nd term, and that is Brian Riley. And Brian is right here in the back. Can I have a motion to renominate Brian? Thank you. In a second. All those in favor of renominating Brian?
Aye.
Great. That's terrific. So we are very excited that we have 1 new trustee joining us tonight. And I'm just going to give you kind of a brief bio. It's with sincere pleasure that I introduce Rose Hache as a proposed new member to the board of the Loon Preservation Committee. This is Rose right here. Rose is a nationally recognized legal expert specializing in the travel industry. She has a deep experience advising high-end leisure and corporate travel providers. She's an honors graduate of Fordham University and received her Juris Doctor from Fordham University School of Law in New York City. Her practice covers a broad spectrum of issues critical to travel businesses, from automation contracts to corporate transactions and risk management. She's also the author of the Guide to Sellers of Travel Law, now in its 20th edition, a leading legal reference in her field. Beyond her professional accomplishments, Rose has a long-standing personal connection to the New Hampshire outdoors. She and her family have lived on Conway Lake for the past 25 years, where they've been active participants in the annual loon count, most recently celebrating a count of 16 loons, including a set of twins and a chick named Sam hatched on the 4th of July. Her husband Dean's family has a history on Conway Lake that spans more than 80 years, deepening their shared commitment to this region and its wildlife. Rose also brings a strong history of community involvement, including many years of board service with the Retina Research Foundation as an engaged Scout mom. She's excited about the opportunity to support LPC's mission and contribute her legal insight, practical experience, and deep respect for loons and their habitat. We're confident that Rose will be a thoughtful, valuable addition to the board. Please join me in welcoming Rose to the board.
Do I make a motion?
Yes, can you make a motion to please welcome her to the board? And second, and all in favor? Thank you for that. The formality is always great. We do have one trustee who is retiring from the board. He too could not be here tonight. Dan Nye. Any comments that we should add about Dan?
Dan Nye is a venture capitalist who helped establish LinkedIn, and he's a strong supporter of the Loon Preservation Committee and has a house on Squam, but he doesn't live there very much as he has a home base in San Francisco. And so he felt it was incumbent on him to retire from our board, and we miss him greatly. He contributed during his first term, but felt that his travels around the world as a venture capitalist would really keep him from coming to meetings. And we like our trustees to be here to deal with the loon issue. So alas, Dan has retired, but we have, as Brenda has indicated, both an exciting new trustee and returning trustees of great talent.
The last thing that I would like to do as chairman of the governance committee is thank Bob Rotberg for his invaluable service as our chair of the board of trustees for the past 3 years. Bob is a man with extensive professional knowledge and has been a tremendous asset. And we would like to give him a small gift in gratitude for his work with us and working for all of you. And so Bob, I'd like to presented to Bob Rotberg with appreciation for your years of service as board chair from the Loon Preservation Committee, 2022 to 2025.
Not only am I surprised and honored by this gift and this recognition, but I'm reminded of an occasion in a different Washington, D.C. many years ago when I gave a presentation thanking the most distinguished historian of colonial America that has ever taught at Harvard. And his first words, which are now mine, I feel posthumous. But I'm not, actually. So thank you. Let me ask Bob Varney to come and give the report of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Bob. And again, thank you for your efforts as chairman. He's really been terrific. He stays on top of all of the issues and has I think, worked really hard to try to improve performance and ensure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that this is a healthy organization financially and to involve everyone in that effort. Very quickly, in terms of our budget and financial situation, we once again ended the fiscal year, which runs until March 31st, in the black. We're very strong financially as an organization, which is very encouraging to hear when you hear about all the difficulties that some places are facing these days. Our revenue was up this past year, and we have seen the fact that our membership is continuing to support the good work that these staff do. They're top-notch scientists. This organization has an international and national reputation for its science and expertise. And of course, beyond the science is the heart. And I think all of us have that association with Loons and what they mean for all of us personally. And it's really terrific. It's if anything, we perhaps undersell what we do for this state and for the other nearby states in terms of protecting and helping to restore the loon population. We have an audit done every single year. They dig into our books. They look at all of our transactions. And once again, we had a flawless audit. And they praised the staff for the good work that they're doing and for the management of our finances. So that's really encouraging, and it's good for you to know that your dollars are being spent properly, being spent well. In terms of expenses, as I mentioned last year, we've been trying to nudge up the salaries here for the staff so that we keep our good staff and we're in line with other environmental organizations and what they're paying their staff and their scientists for the work that they do. So that's been encouraging. And we obviously are facing uncertainties with the economy, but so far so good in terms of the efforts that have been made to try to help us financially. I would also encourage you to take a look at the financial statement that's included in the annual report. And if you have any questions, please contact Harry Vogel or me, and we'd be happy to discuss those things with you. But most of all, please reach out to your friends and neighbors. This is an organization that's driven by donations, and we need that support. And I think there are a lot of people out there that perhaps are not yet members or not yet significant donors who really could be helping and would really enjoy that effort. And also for those of you that are interested in serving on the board in the future, please keep that in mind as well. So with that, I'd like to turn it back to Bob, but thank you all for all you're doing. Thank you for your donations. Thank you for your support. And thanks to the staff for doing such a great job throughout the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Bob mentioned how financially stable we are. Very important thing to remember. He also really talked about something which I like to preach about, which is the scientific prowess of this organization. There is no other organization that knows as much about loons in the entire world as this one. So we're delighted that you're part of a research as well as a preserving centered organization. Now, I see that you have the minutes of last year in front of you. I'd like a motion to approve the minutes of last year, please. So is there a second?
A second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes of last year, now that you've all read every word of them? All in favor? Thank you. Okay. Now, Brenda is going to give the Development Committee report.
So the chair of our Development and Stewardship Committee meeting, Kristen Vigor, cannot be here tonight. She's away at a wedding. So I'm just going to give her report for her. She would like to say thank you to all of our members and donors for being here this evening. I'm reporting on behalf of LPC's Development and Stewardship Committee Chair, Kristen Vigor. First and foremost, a heartfelt thank you to all of you who, through your donations of time and financial gifts, give LPC the ability to do the important work of protecting New Hampshire's loons. Our fundraising efforts were strong in fiscal 2025, due in large part to our committed donors and members. Fundraising efforts focused on all membership types: personal memberships, association and business memberships, and our Loon Leadership Circle memberships. Our Loon Recovery Plan, which funds our first in the nation lead tackle buyback program, our exciting live Loon cameras, and the Squam Lake Loon Initiative, which among other management, research, and outreach is conducting groundbreaking research for forever chemicals in unhatched loon eggs, and a very successful annual fund appeal. We want to remind everyone that a great way to continue your love for loons and your support of LPC's very important work for loons is to include LPC in your estate planning. Our development team can help you with any questions that you may have in regards to that. And we as a whole would like to thank you again for being here and for your valuable support of LPC. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Now, it's my great pleasure to ask Harry Vogel to come and discuss the Spirit of the Loon Award, and then I'll come back. All right.
Thank you, Bob. Good. And hi, everybody. Good evening. So it is my pleasure this evening to present the Loon Preservation Committee's Spirit of the Loon Award. First, a few words about the award. The Loon Preservation Committee's founder, Rawson Wood, created the Loon Preservation Committee in 1975, almost single-handedly through sheer force of will. So Rawson, more than anybody, knew the power of individuals in creating a future for loons here in New Hampshire. And 18 years ago now, we at LPC were contemplating celebrating Rawson's 100th birthday. And our quandary, our dilemma at the time was, what do you get a 100-year-old man who has everything? So we decided that we would take that occasion to honor Rawson in a way that we knew would be meaningful to him by creating an annual award to honor individuals who exemplified outstanding volunteer service to loons in the Loon Preservation Committee. So LPC has close to 1,000 volunteers, and we appreciate each and every one of you. But one person stood out for us this year because of her unique contributions to loon conservation. And that person is Sharon Grader. So Sharon has become well known to LPC staff for the depth and the range of her commitment to loons and LPC. She is one of a dedicated team of volunteers that is monitoring loon activity on Coniston Lake and Perkins Pond. She's been doing that during LPC's annual loon census and over the course of each summer since 2018. In 2019, we asked her to collect an inviable egg from Coniston Lake to preserve it for future testing, and she readily agreed. She attended our Sunapee Region Volunteer Appreciation Potluck that same year, and both of those things seem to solidify her involvement in loon conservation and the Loon Preservation Committee. And in the years since, Sharon has become a regular volunteer at raft and sign building days here and workshops at the Loon Center, despite a long commute from her home. She's helped us float nesting rafts in many areas of the state, and often traveling a long way to do so. She's volunteered long into the night to help LPC staff band loons, and she's helped with community outreach on her local lakes to ensure that those banding episodes went smoothly. And she's helped LPC staff rescue loons in distress. So, for example, this past winter, Sharon drove to the Vermont Institute of Natural Sciences to pick up a loon that had been rescued in New York by staff at the Adirondack Center for Loon Conservation. She then relayed that loon across Vermont and New Hampshire to the ocean. Then she helped LPC's outreach biologist, Caroline Hughes, band it and release it back into the wild. A long day. So Sharon has volunteered for LPC's annual appeal letter mailings. And if folks don't know what that is, please see me and I can be sure that you'll get an annual appeal letter. And also at our big winter event, the Holiday Open House, for the past several years. She is famous and very much appreciated by all the staff for staying and helping until the very last of the cleanup is done. Whenever we need help to float a nesting raft or help a loon in distress in the Sunapee region, Sharon is at the top of our list for people to call. And we've made a lot of those calls over the years, and we can't recall a single time that Sharon has turned down a request to help. So she demonstrates in many ways how much she cares for LPC staff and our work to help loons. She's been an important and a dedicated partner in LPC's efforts to protect and to restore and recover loons in New Hampshire. LPC and all of us who value loons and wildlife owe her a debt of gratitude for her volunteer work. And I am really pleased to name her our Spirit of the Loon Award recipient for this year. And I'll ask Sharon to come up for me. So we have a little loon decoy for Sharon. On the bottom is engraved Loon Preservation Committee 2025 Spirit of the Loon Award presented to Sharon. You can say it, or you can pull it.
I'm not a public speaker. I'm sorry. Thank you. It's just so kind and generous. I'm so honored, surprised, and humbled to be receiving the Spirit of the Loon Award. I started volunteering during an Earth Day event about 5 years ago. We made loon rafts that day, and I've been hooked ever since. It is so rewarding to be able to help the LPC in any capacity, from stuffing envelopes to making and then floating rafts to holding a 10-day-old baby loon chick in my arms. What a magical experience. I was able to transport a loon to the ocean in February, part of a multi-state heroic rescue that started in New York. What an incredible team Loon Preservation Committee is. It is so rewarding to volunteer next to such knowledgeable and dedicated people. Thank you to Caroline, Ashley, John, Harry, Kirsten, and Holly, to name a few. I'm thankful to be able to help these magical, magnificent birds who lure us with their haunting and soulful calls. I retired in May, so I hope and plan to help much more. Again, thank you very much for choosing me to receive this award. I am so happy and grateful.
Thank you for doing what you've been doing. And you're clearly a model for all of us. Thank you. Thank you. This is the moment to ask someone to make a motion to adjourn the 51st annual meeting of the Loon Preservation Committee. I'd welcome such a motion? Here we have motion, we have second, all in favor? And now we can transition very nicely into the next event because our beloved and esteemed director of the Loon Preservation Committee is beginning his 30th year with us. So thanks, Harry, for being with us. And we look forward to your report.
Wonderful.
Harry.
Good, thank you. It's going to take us just a few minutes to get set up.
They have to find a loon.
During the transition, I just want to say that out at the, where we had dinner, if you didn't get a copy of the Birds of New Hampshire by Keith and Alan Keith and Robert Fox, there's a box of them out there, and I know there are more. One of the authors is sitting behind me, and he'd be happy to sign it if you would like it. But these were donated by the Nuttall Ornithological Club, that was the publisher of them. And there's the photo on the cover is from Mark Wilson, who at one point was from Storm Lake area. And it just is 100 years of history of birds in New Hampshire, which is an invaluable historical reference. And I hope you'll enjoy it if you take it. Thanks.
Thank you, Dana.
Thanks. The incredible Caroline. Sure.
Yes.
Find out.
Very already.
Good.
Great.
What are you looking
Harvard.
Should be my
Full time level.
at? Is that in the Lion area or?
Huffenborough, if you're driving, between Huffenborough and Wilkesboro.
I don't know, it's down here, and my note. They're tall. So.
So we're at Huffenborough.
So you may be on the other side of the window.
It's on the lake side of Winter Harbor.
West side.
West side.
Okay.
Post office is in Huffenborough. There is a post office. My yard backs on.
Think we're ready to go. Let me just double check that.
Sure. Yes, sounds great.
Just a summer cash.
I'm gonna, all
Are
right,
things working how you
I'm
need
gonna
them to?
leave it. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay, you're seeing me. If you want to see yourself.
Yeah.
Then,
There are more boxes of those.
Wait, can we move that up, please? But no.
yeah, if you just grab it, you can move it wherever you want it.
Good.
Grab, click on the black, yeah, you got it.
All right, I think we're set, right?
Good.
Yes, please, if you could, Caroline.
There's any items.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, hi, folks. Thank you all for being here. Boy, even before I start my presentation, I want to tell you that a couple of days ago, I got a call from a nice lady at New Hampshire Public Radio. And she said, Harry, would you like to talk to me for a few minutes about the loon population in New Hampshire so that we can put this on air? And I said, I would not. because I first want to talk to all of our great volunteers and supporters because they deserve to know this news first before anybody else does. But I said if we could tape something and then we could air it at the earliest tomorrow. So I effectively embargoed this momentous news. But I just did want you to let you know that I wanted you all to hear it first here tonight. So. Good. So I'd like to take a few minutes this evening to just talk about LPC's work this summer to help our loons cope with some of the challenges that they are facing and also present some preliminary results to give you all a sense of what kind of a year it's been for loons this year. I hope that we can do that. Let me see. Oh, you do not want to advance. Let's try this. Ta-da, got it. Thank you, Caroline. All it took was for you to come up. And there we go. Good. All right. So to start at the beginning, the Loon Preservation Committee was created back in 1975 because people had noticed that our loons were becoming less common on our lakes. And the thinking at that time was that if human activities had contributed to those declines, and it seemed pretty likely that they had, then human activities, if they were coordinated and thoughtful, could reverse those declines. And that was the hope and the philosophy on which the Loon Preservation Committee was created. So there had already been some surveys of loons on Squam Lake and Lake Winnipesaukee, sponsored by the Squam Lakes Association and New Hampshire Audubon. The force behind making those surveys happen was Rawson Wood, an avid birder and a resident of Squam Lake. And the results of those surveys were pretty sobering. So they turned up one loon chick on the 44,000 acres of Winnipesaukee, just down here, and an almost equally grim picture on Squam. So Rawson was a trustee of New Hampshire Audubon. And as I understand the story, in 1975, Rawson stood up at a New Hampshire Audubon board meeting and announced that he was creating a new committee of New Hampshire Audubon. It would be called the Loon Preservation Committee. It would be self-funded and self-directed, and it would be based out of the Lakes region. And then he sat down, and that was that. The Loon Preservation Committee was created. So our mission over these past 50 years has been to restore and maintain a healthy population of loons throughout New Hampshire, to monitor the health and the productivity of loons and loon populations as indicators of environmental health or the quality of our lakes and ponds, and to promote a greater understanding and a wider appreciation of not just loons, but also the larger natural world. Here we are at the Loon Center in Waltonboro, and this is our headquarters and our visitor center, but LPC carries out programs of monitoring and research and management and education throughout the entire state. And we're helped in those efforts by close to 1,000 volunteers throughout the state. And here are a number of those volunteers at a raft and sign building day this April. We also have a small but dedicated staff. So every year we hire a number of seasonal field biologists to help us carry out our work across the state. This is our crew back in 1978. So this is early on in our history. We've grown since then to keep pace with a growing number of loons in our state and a growing number of challenges facing those loons. So this is our lineup for 2025. And together, our members and our volunteers and our staff do several different things. And so the first thing that we do is count loons. And counting loons gives us our first indication of problems with our loon population. It's also the ultimate measure of our success in trying to keep these birds common. So we've been monitoring loons since 1975. And as Bob alluded to, over that span of years, we've actually created the longest running and most comprehensive database of loons and loon populations that exist anywhere in the world right here in New Hampshire. So this is Caden Payne, our outreach intern on Massabesic Lake this summer. So this year, LPC volunteers and staff monitored 362 lakes throughout the state. Not all of those lakes have loons, but all of them have the potential to have loons, and we hope that more of them will have loons in the future. So we deal with that large number of lakes by carving the state up into these different monitoring regions, and we assign a biologist to each of those regions. And of course, it's one thing to say that our loon populations are increasing or they're decreasing, but we also want to know what are the factors that are contributing to those changes. And so we do research of various kinds. One of those research activities is banding loons. And so here is our senior biologist, John Cooley, banding a loon on Upper Baker Pond this summer. And we band loons because there's still a lot that we don't know about these birds, despite their popularity. So even some pretty basic aspects of loon life history were until recently unknown. And even today, they can be based on fairly limited amount of data. So every loon that we band gets a unique combination of bands. And once we've banded these birds, we can begin to follow them over their lifetimes. So this is the Lower Baker Pond female. She was first banded on Armington Lake as an adult in 2005. So she's probably 26 years old or older. And we gave her new bands this year to replace her old faded 20-year-old bands. This summer, we have spent 30 banding nights on New Hampshire lakes, many nights with 2 crews on different parts of the state. We've banded 63 loons throughout the state. This is Ella Green, our Pemigewasset region biologist, banding a loon on Pawtuckaway Lake this summer. Sometimes it's hard to tell who caught who. So here's Caroline Hughes, our outreach biologist, untangling a loon she netted that same night on Pawtuckaway Lake. As long as we have a loon in the hand, we take a small sample of blood. We test that blood for lead, for other contaminants, for stress indicating hormones. We can look for blood parasites in that blood. We can even learn about the genetics of loons through looking at their blood. So this is John drawing a small sample of blood from a loon on Lower Baker Pond. We also clip a couple of feathers. We test those feathers for mercury. In the past, we've tested them for cyanobacteria toxins. We can do genetics work on the feathers as well. This is Talia Ungarelli, our intern at large, clipping a feather from a loon on Walker Pond. So when we catch the adults, we catch the chicks as well. And we hold those chicks for safekeeping and so that we can release the family together. There's nothing quite like holding a little loon chick. This is Josh Warwa, our Sunapee region biologist, holding 2 chicks that they were caught from Walker Pond this summer. And this chick is too small to band or take any blood from. Doesn't mean it didn't try to take some from us, though. It's you can see it here trying to take a bite out of Bryn Seal, who is our Tufts veterinary intern. It's adorable when the chicks do it, but it is less fun when their parents do the same thing. But most of the time, the chicks just take this all in stride. So this one seems ready to take a nap on Ella's lap. With the advent of highly pathogenic avian influenza or bird flu, we are taking extra precautions when we band loons. So here's Ella hosing down Mike DeGioia, our Seacoast region biologist, to decontaminate him between banding different loon pairs. We also collect inviable loon eggs from failed nests. This is Ali Malouk, one of our Winnipesaukee biologists, collecting eggs of our whaleback pair on Winnipesaukee. And that was actually during a night of banding this summer. And this is kind of personal because this is the pair which nests right here by the Loon Center. We will test some of those eggs for a wide range of contaminants. So this is Ollie Killinen, our West Lakes region biologist, taking some measurements on an inviable egg before logging it into LPC's freezer. This is one of 93 eggs we collected from failed loon nests in 2025. That is actually not a record, but I think it might be something like the 3rd highest number that we have ever collected from one summer. Tiffany Grotti, our Squam Lakes biologist, collected 15 inviable eggs from Squam Lake this summer. And that was a record for Squam and not one that Tiffany was happy with. LPC's testing of failed loon eggs is the most comprehensive testing done on any loon eggs anywhere. So we have found concerning levels of legacy contaminants, including PCBs and DDT in some of these loon eggs, and concerning levels of these emerging contaminants like PFAS in others. We've published the results of that testing in reports, and we're now writing up those results in 2 papers for submission to peer-reviewed scientific journals. We also worked to rescue loons in distress. This winter was pretty quiet for rescues of loons that had become iced in, although there were a couple of those. As the last holes of open water iced over, our field program coordinator, Ashley Keenan, and I took a flight with Mike McNamara. He is a volunteer pilot with the Lighthawk organization. And we took off on a windy January day to check for any straggler loons in need of rescue. And that flight was a little bumpy. So my most vivid recollection of the flight is that every time that Mike tipped the wing over so that we could get a good look at the lakes, I heard these exclamations of, "Oh, Jesus," from Ashley. But she overcame her fear of flying for the loons. Maybe she was right to be worried, though, because our landing was a little rough. Now, not this rough. This is actually another plane. But we had fun showing this to our gullible coworkers when we got back to the base. So our rescue efforts have continued throughout the summer. We have rescued 17 loons so far this year. Here are Allie and Ashley capturing a chick from Ossipee Lake. This chick didn't want to be put into a box, but by the time we are called to rescue them, they are usually in need of some care. Here is Bryn using LPC's portable X-ray machine to get a radiograph of a loon picked up from Manning Lake. And that equipment has made a huge difference in our ability to diagnose loons in the field to determine the best course of action for these birds. So happily, that X-ray showed no ingested lead tackle, no broken bones, no other health issues that would keep it from being released. So here are LPC's other veterinary intern, Kanyalani Malanga, and Ella and Bryn, and they are about to release that loon on a nearby pond so that it could quietly recover. So our goal is always to release these birds back to the wild. So this is Lonnie releasing a loon on Newfound Lake. We captured that loon tangled in monofilament fishing line, and we were able to untangle it and release it right away. And you never know what you're going to find if you go to use the downstairs bathroom at the Loon Center. This is a chick from Broad Bay in LPC's bathtub. It had a small broken bone in its wing, so we kept it overnight. We stuffed it full of bait fish, and then we were able to release it back to its parents the next day. And this is the first loon chick hatched in living memory on Opeechee Bay. So it was hatched from a raft that we had floated there. The beachgoer's sons had found it floating by itself, and they wanted to take it home as a pet. We returned it to its parents instead. But as happy as it is to release a loon, back to its parents or back to the wild, there are some very sad moments too. So this is the male loon from our Loon Cam 1 pair. Many of you will have watched him sitting on the nest throughout the summer. We got a call that he was acting strangely, and he died before we could get there. And the suspected, not yet confirmed, cause of his death was avian malaria. And if confirmed, and it likely will be, it will be the second loon death from avian malaria this summer. So as our climate has warmed, it has brought this disease, which is a warm weather, if not tropical disease, to New Hampshire and to New Hampshire's loons. So these unfortunate loons that we find dead or have to euthanize have historically gone to Mark Pokris. He's a veterinarian at the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts University. One of the best ways of finding out what's affecting loons at a population level is to find out what's killing individual birds. And so we started sending dead loons to Mark in the 1980s, and he's been telling us what they died of. So this, for example, is how we first found out about the problem of lead sinkers and lead-headed jigs in our loons. Mark retired a number of years ago now, but not really. He's continued to help us in a huge number of different ways. And one of those is by sending great veterinary students our way. And this again is Lonnie and Glenn. So far, we have had only one loon mortality from ingested lead fishing tackle, which is great news. But it was from Merry Meeting Lake, where we had 3 lead deaths last year. So somebody on Merry Meeting Lake is getting their tackle from Grandpa's old tackle box and putting that on the line and using it to go fishing. So that old lead tackle is now illegal to use in New Hampshire. But thankfully, overall, our lead deaths are declining. And I take that as evidence that our lead tackle buyback program is working. So this is the 8th year of that program. This year, we doubled our reward to people willing to give up their old lead fishing tackle. We're now giving $20 vouchers to people who hand in old lead tackle at participating tackle shops so that they can buy Loon safe, non-toxic tackle. And at each of those shops, the person turning in the largest amount of tackle this year is going to get a check for $100 from the Loon Preservation Committee. The person handing in the second largest amount of tackle is going to get $50 from the Loon Preservation Committee. So we're serious about getting this lead out of our loons. And please do visit loonsafe.org for details and a list of participating retailers in that program. We're continuing to take every opportunity to spread the word about that important program for loons. We recruited 3 new tackle shops this summer, and this is Caroline staffing our display at our Loon Festival. We're also working with transfer stations to inform people about this issue and collect lead tackle. This is a picture from my transfer station in Ashland, and I love this picture because it's kind of hard to miss that banner. So the smallest piece of lead tackle will kill a loon if it ingests it. So far, we have collected over 80,000 pieces of lead tackle that are never going to find their way into our lakes or our loons. We also work in other ways to minimize human impacts on loons. So we float nesting loons to help loons that have been displaced from their traditional nesting sites by shoreline development or human recreational use of our lakes. These rafts, although they're anchored to the bottom, they float. So they also help loons on lakes with changing water levels because they go up and down as those water levels change. So here is Ollie doing some maintenance on a raft floated on Hildreth Pond this spring. These rafts come in all shapes and sizes. Here is the Harvey Lake raft that was built and floated by Loon Preservation Committee volunteers. This raft hatched a chick this year, which is the first chick hatched on Harvey Lake since before we began our monitoring in 1975. Wow. Yeah. And the male of this pair was banded as an older chick on Swains Lake back in 1999. So he's 26 years old. And his dad, who we banded at the same time, is at least 30 and still producing chicks on Swains Lake. This year, we floated 149 of these rafts throughout the state. Close to 1 out of every 3 loon chicks hatched in the state came from a raft floated by LPC staff or volunteers. So this is volunteer Jack Fox and Caroline floating a raft on Winnipesaukee this year. Some of those rafts have game cameras attached to them so that we can document nesting success or, sadly, the reasons for nest failure. Almost all of them have covers and now UV reflecting fabric to help protect nesting loons from eagles and from rising temperatures. Here are Ashley and Allie on First Connecticut Lake this year. Sometimes our rafts provide habitat for other animals. We don't mind at all if the turtle suns itself once in a while. But whoever messed with this raft on Mendham's Pond went a little overboard with the renovations, right? And so that was not appreciated. Every year we float protective signs and sometimes rope lines around nesting loons to give them the space they need to incubate their eggs and hatch their chicks. This is Mike floating a sign on Northwood Lake this summer. We protected 127 nesting loon pairs with signs this year, and pairs protected by those measures hatched exactly 1 out of every 2 chicks hatched on New Hampshire's lakes this summer. Here is Ella putting out some signs on Hunter's Pond. So the nest she protected with those signs hatched a chick, and that happened to be the first chick ever hatched, at least in modern history, on Hunter's Pond. Our signs are generally well respected by lake users, but this eagle on Waukesha Lake was being a bit of a jerk. So once chicks are hatched, we often float these caution loon chick signs to make boaters aware and slow boats down a little bit. This is one of our volunteers, Matt Niswender, floating one of those signs on Stones Lake. And many of our lakes receive a number of management boosts to try and increase productivity. So, for example, we work every year with dam owners to maintain stable water levels during critical nesting periods. And overall, this summer, more than 70% of the chicks hatched on New Hampshire's lakes benefited from some type of LPC management. And that probably makes loons one of, if not the most intensively managed wildlife species in the state. And we're confident that every loon benefited from our educational efforts. So those included our educational signs posted at access points of lakes. They included exhibits at locations throughout the state. Here's Caden at Lake Life Realty just last week. We gave in-person talks about loons and the challenges and our work to help them at lake associations and other venues, including right here at the Loon Center. Here's Caden again at the Loon Center. So far this year, we have given 108 exhibits and presentations throughout the state. We continued our partnership with the Squam Lakes Natural Science Center to have our Squam Lakes biologist, Tiffany Grotti, give educational loon cruises on Squam. Tiffany and LPC were able to continue our work to understand and reverse the declines of loons on Squam Lake, thanks to generous supporters of our Squam Lake Loon Initiative. Caroline has continued to expand the Loon Preservation Committee website. We have a lot of information there on loon natural history, including a whole section devoted to loon behavior and the calls of loons. And we have information about our work in support of loons there as well. So please do check us out at loon.org. Caroline continues to publish the LPC e-newsletter. So that now goes out to over 7,500 people. If you'd like to be added to that list, please see Caroline. Our Instagram account has over 1,800 followers. Our YouTube channel has over 9,000 subscribers. And our Facebook page has over 23,000 followers. And LPC super volunteer Bill Gassman worked incredibly hard once again this year to set up and run 2 LPC loon cams and broadcast 2 nesting pairs of loons to the world. The loon cams had over 286,000 views, even though sadly, no chicks this year. So we've been working hard to get the word out in different ways. We also have a number of events to celebrate loons and our fascination with them. The 3rd Saturday of July is an important day for loons here in New Hampshire. It starts with the Loon Census, which is our annual effort to get as many people as we can out in the lakes counting loons from 8 to 9 a.m. So here are Ella and our North Country biologist, Lauren O'Malley, looking for loons on Census Day on Winnipesaukee. We had 566 people, and as always, at least one Labrador Retriever take part in that fine tradition. Altogether, we counted 650 loon adults and chicks, and those figures are rolled up into our season-long monitor. Then starting at 10 o'clock that same day, we had our Loon Festival. Our good friends at Meredith Rotary were there with free hot dogs and ice cream for everybody. Our biologists gave loon talks in the garage of our Kitty and John Wilson Field Operations Center. Here are Ollie and Caden giving one of those talks. You could dunk a loon biologist if you answered a loon question correctly, or even if you couldn't, but contributed $1 to the cause. And you could get your face painted, and there were crafts for kids of all ages, including some of our field biologists, and many other activities. So our very first Loon Festival was held at the Bald Peak Colony Club back in 1978. And it looks like it was a slightly more formal affair back then. Well, we returned to that venue this summer to celebrate our 50th anniversary of good work to help loons and recover our loon population. So, it's been another busy and challenging year for the Loon Preservation Committee. Like all nonprofits, we rely on our volunteers to help us in our work. So I want to take this moment to thank all of our volunteers and supporters for your help this year. We could not do this work without you. We could not do this work without you. So soon enough, it was time to pull our rafts and signs off the water again, to wait for another spring and another breeding season. And then it was time to take all that data we collected over the course of the summer and enter it into LPC's database. So that is not exciting work, but it is important. Our database includes data going back to 1975. So this year we actually entered a 51st year of data on loons and our work to preserve them. And that added to what was already the longest running and the most comprehensive database on any loon population anywhere. And I like this photo because you can see Ollie here in the blue t-shirt, and he's gesturing, and I'm thinking maybe he's, telling John the size of one of his loons. And I'm thinking John is looking a little skeptical. So I think this picture may have captured a moment in time, which is the very first stage of an exhaustive error checking process that goes on. And that process is going to continue right up until our technical committee meeting in early November. And that is a meeting of our peers, scientists and representatives of the state and federal agencies that we work with, including New Hampshire Fish and Game, New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And that group of people gets together to question every aspect of our data collection and our results. And it is only when they are satisfied that our numbers will be final. So the numbers that I'm about to show you are still preliminary, and they might go up and down, a little bit as we go through more of that error checking process. But we're pretty convinced that the trends that they show are correct and meaningful. So the good news is that in 2025, we had more than 6 times the number of paired loons as we had when we began our work back in 1975. So when we talk about a paired loon, this is this red line. This is simply a loon that pairs up with another loon that will defend a lake or an area of water from intruding loons and will have at least the potential to breed and to contribute to that next generation. So again, these preliminary numbers show that we gained a few pairs since last year. We actually topped 360 loon pairs this year. Now, only a proportion of those loons breed. That is that black line, those are the nesting adults. And we define a nesting pair as a pair of loons that builds a nest and lays at least one egg in that nest. So that was up again, and like our paired adults, it was a new record, and our chicks hatched and our chicks surviving, both up from last year, and new records for those as well. So as nice as it is, though, to see these generally increasing lines, we have a long way to go to reach what we feel like are the historical populations, somewhere in between these two green lines. And that space between this red line and somewhere in here, that represents a lot of lakes that we think ought to have loons on them that still don't. So this recovery is ongoing. And even after 50 years of work, by some measures, we may only be halfway or slightly more than halfway towards a recovered population. If we go a level deeper into this data, we can derive these relative reproductive success characteristics. And so the blue line on this graph is a proportion of territorial pairs that nested. So this year we had more than 2/3 of our territorial pairs nest, and that is up from last year, and it's about on par with our results for the past 10 years. The red line is loon hatching success. So we are close to 1 chick hatched per nesting pair of loons this year. And that is up from the last 2 years, which was a very welcome change because the last 2 years have not been great years for our loon population. And then that green line is chick survival. So what this is saying is that once about 3/4 of our chicks that were hatched are still surviving at this point of the year. And that is up from last year. And it's about as good as it's been over the past 10 years. But as we continue our late season checks on chick survival, that may diminish a tiny bit as well. So take all 3 of these factors together, the fact that we have a number of territorial pairs, only a proportion of those territorial pairs nest. Those nesting pairs will have a certain average number of chicks hatched, and a proportion of those chicks that have hatched will have survived to this point of the year. All of those things together lead to this statistic, loon chicks surviving per territorial pair in New Hampshire. So the red line on this graph is 0.48 chicks surviving per territorial pair. And that's the number that we know from research done by Loon Preservation Committee and other organizations as well, we know that we need to hit that line on average in order to maintain a stable and viable loon population. And of course, we want to do more than just maintain. We want to continue to recover our loon population. So in 2025, we were above that line and above our poor results for the past 2 years. But on average, over the past 5 or 10 years, we have not been. So this is an important graph because the times in our history when we have experienced really solid and robust loon growth, we can trace those periods back to times like the early 2000s here, where we spent a good number of years well above that line. And lately, it's been harder to stay above that line. And so our concern as we look at this graph is that as we continue to lose adult loons from lead tackle ingestion or monofilament entanglement or boat collisions from other loons, now from avian malaria, where are the loons going to be coming from to replace those loons that we have lost? And it's been getting harder, to stay above that red line, even with the incredibly intensive management that these loons have benefited from over all of these years. So this year, 58% of our loon nests were successful. That is exactly the same percentage as last year, but it's a higher number because there are a higher number of nesting pairs. More than half of those loon nests resulted in 2 chicks. The rest hatched only 1 chick. And so that's success light, but it's still success, and we'll take that. Of the nests that failed, about half of them are unknown. And that is because a nest failure can happen in the blink of an eye. And so a wave can wash over a nest and wash a loon nest out. An eagle can come and snatch that loon egg. If we don't have a camera on that nest or eyes on that nest, we may never know the reason why that nest failed. But some of those failures, were due to other loons, and that's that blue slice. So generally now there are happily more loons out there as a result of many years of management and outreach. These intrusions of other loons into loon territories are generally more frequent on big lakes that have areas of undefended water where loons can gather, and then they can wander, into adjacent loon territories and make some trouble for those nesting pairs. So 5 of those 9 failures from other loons were actually on Winnipesaukee. So we also had an increased number of nests that failed due to water level changes. So high water and rains in May and June contributed to those, as did wakes from boats. We are not big fans of wake boats here at the Loon Preservation Committee. We had the same, and then we had the same number of predations as last year. So we had, interestingly, no confirmed nest losses due to human disturbance. So we had a string of rainy weekends from late May to early July. That made for some quiet weekends on our lakes, which was fine by our loons. However, going back to predations again, many of those predations may have a human component because populations of egg predators like raccoons and gulls have benefited from their association with humans. Their populations have risen to unnaturally high levels because of ready access to human food waste and garbage. And then they have put pressure on our loons and other native wildlife species. And some of those predations may well have happened only after people flushed a loon off of the nest. So it's an interesting and worrisome fact here that over time, we are seeing a larger proportion of loon eggs that are over-incubated. And these are eggs that fail, but for no obvious reason. So could this be due to contaminants? Could it be due to loons being forced off of nests by other loons, or by increasing numbers of people on the lakes, or by increasing heat, forcing loons off of nests to cool off in the water, or by increased turbidity of water after increasing numbers and intensity of storm events, making it harder for loons to find food and requiring them to be off of that nest for longer, or by some combination of the above, or by something else entirely. So these loons are living in these complex natural ecosystems, and it can be really hard to tease out the forces that are driving these changes. But the benefit of having over 50 years of data now is that we can look back and see how loons fared in wet years and in dry years, in hot years and in cool years, in years with heat waves, and years with storm events. So every dot on this graph represents a year of nesting success for New Hampshire's loons. And we know that a lot of rain and rain events increase nest failures. Our record wet summer in 2023 made it a very tough year for our loons. And then last summer, we had less rain, but more heat. And loons are a northern species, so they are close to the southern limit of their breeding range here in New Hampshire. And that means that loons on the nest suffer in hot weather. So they need to leave the nest more often to cool down. That leaves those eggs exposed to predators. But even if a predator doesn't get those eggs, they're exposed to heat. And that can essentially cook an egg on the nest and kill an embryo developing inside of that egg. So we can see here a clear trend in LPC's data. Summers with hotter June, July temperatures mean fewer loon chicks hatched per nesting pair of loons. That R squared of 0.2 means that there's only about 20% of the variability in loon hatching success that can be explained by changes in mean June, July temperature. So there's a lot of other things going on here. And there are many, many reasons why a loon nest can fail. But it's concerning all the same, because New Hampshire summers are getting hotter, and we expect them to continue to get hotter in the future. So there will still be cool summers in New Hampshire, but those cool, dry summers that are conducive to loon breeding will likely be fewer and farther between in the future. And LPC's challenge has always been, and it will continue to be, to help loons cope with their challenges, and that includes climate stressors in bad years, and also help them make the most of those good years that are yet to come. So to wrap up, for our volunteers and staff, it was a summer of good work to benefit our loons. Sometimes that was on warm summer days under blue skies, and sometimes not, and sometimes really not. Back roads of New Hampshire took their toll on vehicles. If you're wondering why Marcus looks so happy, it may be because that is another of our biologist cars that is being repaired and not his. But our staff remained cheerful through it all. When they got tired of looking for loons on their lakes, they decided to look for them on the ocean. We saw a lot of loons, saw a lot of other great wildlife. We had some moments of high drama on the high seas. And we worked some long days carrying out our monitoring and research and management and outreach throughout the state. And those were often followed, by some late nights. So by the end of the summer, we really felt like we had squeezed every ounce of work out of these biologists that we could. Here they are on their last day. And of course, there's still much work to be done. And the impacts of LPC's work go far beyond loons, and they go far beyond New Hampshire. Loons are a sentinel of environmental quality. They're an indicator of the health of our aquatic ecosystems. So they're scientifically important, and they have this wide public appeal. And that, I think, is why they have found themselves to be a focal point to so many of our environmental issues. And that means that if we can save loons, then we can save a lot of other species that depend on the same clean water and quiet places. And I like to think that at the same time as we've been working to recover our loon population, we've also been working to encourage an environmental ethic. And ultimately, that's going to benefit not just loons, but other wildlife and even the people and the economy of New Hampshire, because after all, that is a large part of the reason why we have chosen to visit or live here. So our hope is that the end result of all of our efforts will be a bright future for New Hampshire's loons. And I prefer to think of this as my sunrise photo. So that is the end of my presentation, but I would love to answer any questions. I would love to answer any questions that folks have about loons or LPC's work to help them. Could we bring up the lights maybe? Great. Thank you. Any questions? Oh, Dana, yes. Only softball questions. Okay. Oh.
Because you've been here for 30 years. I hope you're here for 30 more.
No doubt.
And I hope everyone appreciated that gentleman gave that talk without reading a thing. He wasn't even looking always at the PowerPoint. So he is extraordinary.
I beg to differ, Dana. I was reading my notes because there are too many numbers and things for me to keep it in my head anymore. Okay. Well, thank you.
We thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Bye. Thank you, Dana. This is an easy talk to give because I am just the mouthpiece for all of the amazing efforts done by an incredible, staff. That includes the field staff and the year-round staff as well. So,
Thank you.
And a very able mouthpiece.
well, thank you. Thank you. All right. Does anybody have any questions about Loon's or LPC's work?
Do we know
Yes, Dana.
anything about the temperatures this year? I mean, they were abusive. And
Yeah.
do we know any more?
Yeah.
details?
Well, on that temperature graph, we saw 2025. And so it wasn't the highest temperature that we've experienced here, at least in terms of average June, July temperatures. And June, as I recall, was kind of cold. We did have a hot spell, as I recall, late in June. We had, we had some heat waves in there. And that could have been enough, to cause some of these inviable loon eggs, the large number that we picked up.
Is there any way we can tell whether it was heat from testing the eggs?
Now that we have our portable X-ray machine, we've actually found that we can X-ray these loon eggs as well, and at least see if there's been, on a very kind of gross scale, if there's been any development in these loon eggs. So we're going to find out. I think we'll be looking into that a little bit more and to see if they were just inviable from the beginning, or did they develop to some point and then stop developing. The heartbreaking thing, Dana, is when we open up an egg and there's a fully formed chick, in there. And I just think to myself, that chick was ready to go. And then we hit the July 4th weekend and somebody parked themselves right off of that nest, flushed that loon, and that was it, for that developing egg. And so it's really important to give these birds some space if they're on the nest or loons with small chicks so that they can do what loons need to do. Yes, yeah.
I was just curious, my friends and I think we've seen paired loons trailed by as many as 5 or 6 chicks. Are we confusing them with another species?
Yeah. If you are, with loons, the rule really is 1 or 2 chicks. And a very small, less than 1% of the time, loons will lay a 3rd egg. And loons have also been known, every once in a while, a chick will wander over to the next territory and graft, itself on to another pair. But I have never, and I've seen, pictures of loons with four chicks in tow. 2 of them were loon chicks and 2 of them were ducklings. So, those types of things can happen as well. But I would have to say it's pretty likely that you might have been seeing a merganser, rather than a loon if you're looking at that number of chicks. Yeah. One of the things that has made our job very hard at the Loon Preservation Committee is that loons, they have a delayed age until they mature. So from banding loons, we know that an average age of first breeding is 6 or 7 years old. We followed some loons until they were 10 or 11 years old before they first bred. And then they will have only 1 or 2 chicks, and so any animal with that kind of, with those life history characteristics, a delayed age until first reproduction and then a really limited reproductive potential, it means that once loons are gone from an area, it is really hard to get them back, and it takes a long time. So, and it also means that adult survival is really paramount to this species, because we want those adults to live many, many years so that they have many opportunities over those years to hit a good year with decent temperatures and little human disturbance and be able to hatch chicks and replace themselves. Yes.
You showed a picture of some of the staff out at sea in the summer.
Yeah.
Looking for loons. Are there loons that stay at sea?
There, yeah.
In the summer?
So I think this was a little outing, for our staff towards the end of the summer when everybody had gelled as a unit. They decided they wanted to head over to the ocean and see not just loons, but a whole bunch of other things. And I'm jealous because they saw a lot of good stuff on there. But there are loons on the ocean. And in fact, once our chicks hatch here, the chicks the adults that we see coming back are not last year's chicks, because it takes, essentially, these chicks are about 26 months old when they first molt into their black and white plumage, which we actually call the alternate or the breeding plumage of loons. And then often it's another year or so that they'll spend on the ocean before they first begin to come back and then attempt to gain a territory of their own. So if you're out on the ocean, you may see, these young birds. And it's possible as well that if you're seeing loons that have set up, territories on lakes that are close to the ocean, that they may actually pop on over, and try and have like a lobster or a crab for dinner instead of a yellow perch or something like that. So that can happen as well.
How many loons is there? I'm not sure.
So the actual, John, what was our total number of adults? I'm putting John or Caroline. What was this?
358 pairs.
Right.
That's,
Yeah.
736.
And right. So we concentrate mostly on paired loons because those are the ones that are really important to the immediate reproductive success of loons and going forward. And these unpaired loons, often they're mobile as well, so they're harder to keep track of. The loon census can help us to nail, down those unpaired loons. But usually you've got paired loons, and then you've got about 15%, give or take, that are unpaired as well. And John's got his calculator out, so he's going to find that. But he's going to get us that number. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Right. So our Loon Cam 1 loon, do we know how old he was?
He was originally banned in 2014.
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
But more.
Yeah. So probably at least 17 years old, and he could have been much older. Once they're adult loons, there's really no good way at this point to age them. I think that we're working on being able to do that and at least get an approximate age. But it's pretty difficult. And it's one of those many things about loons that we don't have a great understanding of, the aging process and even ultimately their maximum lifespan. These are things that we are still based on very limited data. So we're trying to find that out. Yes.
From the population counts that you take, have you made any observation as to body of water that has had an increase in the number of loons coming to that body of water or a decrease?
Yeah, so that's a great question. A lot of times, really prime loon breeding habitat in New Hampshire is a lake that may be like 100 to 300 acres in size. And so, in that situation, a loon will most often land on that lake and they'll claim the entire lake. So we may think that there are lakes, but the loons know that they're there. They're lakes. And that's a rule of thumb, because you can have a 300-acre lake, and if it's circular, you're probably only going to have one pair of loons. But take that same 300-acre lake and pinch it, in the middle, so that you have two distinct bays, and you could easily have a loon setting up in either territory. So in terms of on Winnipesaukee, for example, we've had a consistent increase in the number of nesting pairs and territorial pairs. Rachel, how many do we have? I'm going to put you on the spot this time.
Territorial pairs.
Yeah.
Or around.
Yeah.
Pairs around.
Right.
It dropped off a little bit as nests failed.
Yes. Yeah. But that number of nesting pairs, I believe, was a record for Winnipesaukee. It must have been, if it was close, if it wasn't. And so what we've seen is, a gradual increase on Winnipesaukee, still below historical levels. We think probably 50 pairs easily, maybe more for all we know on Winnipesaukee, in the old days. But often what we're finding is that we have a small lake that is empty. And then one year we get a report of a visiting loon, and we think, good, we're on our way. Because a year or two will go by, and then we'll have like a report of a loon that seemed to stay there all season long. And then before you know it, we've got a pair, there, and then another couple of years, and maybe we have a nest and a chick. And so many of these, like the chicks that I had shown, we had several lakes this year that have had nesting chicks for the first time since we've ever, taken records. And that's what we like to see. We like to see these birds recolonizing those lakes because they should be there. They're a part of the natural ecosystem, and we're hoping to return all of our suitable lakes to that condition. Yeah.
So
Yes.
if you see a loon starting to look like they're going to establish themselves on a body of water that they haven't, do you put a floating nest there?
Yes, that's a great question. So we would not put a floating nest there. And for one reason, with a very small number of exceptions, what we have found is that simply floating a nest will not attract loons to a lake. Really, they have to set themselves up on that lake by themselves and then nest and then fail. And once they've had a couple of two or three successive failures, that lake will begin to consider, that lake for a nesting raft, in the hopes that these rafts can help with mammalian predation, or they can help with loons with changing water levels. But a lot of folks, think of rafts as a panacea for everything that ails, our loons here in New Hampshire, and they're definitely not. So rafts are a management tool that can help loons overcome very specific situations, but in other cases, rafts will not help loons at all. So we look at each of these lakes on a case-by-case basis. And that's, fall and winter work that we do as we look over these lakes, and then we determine which of these lakes can support a raft and which lakes a raft will help on. So for this year, or at least I know for last year, of these 149 rafts that we floated, I think only a little bit more than a third were used by loons. And so some loons take right to these rafts and they're great. They begin to be productive. And other ones, they swim up to it and they say, no way, I'm not getting on that rickety thing. And we never do get them to use them.
Very frustrating.
Can be. It can be. Yes, sure.
If temps were to continue to go up and up and up.
Yeah.
Does that mean the loons are gonna push north towards Canada, the cooler temps eventually, if that were to happen?
Yeah. So I think more likely what is going to happen is that as these temperatures continue to rise and as loons have increased difficulty in actually nesting successfully and producing chicks, if we cannot continue, to institute good management to help them overcome those, and so far we've been successful, in taking these rafts and putting this UV reflecting fabric. It's a very simple thing, but it gives loons shade, and so it helps them to stay on those rafts. And with the apparent temperature decrease that we have seen with loons nesting under those rafts, we figure we've bought them 2 or 3 decades at least of global warming, time to be able to help them.
What if they start to nest earlier?
It's possible as well that loons can have a behavioral adaptation and just begin to nest earlier in the season to avoid that really hot spell of the summer. But if none of those things are successful, then what we would expect is that the reproductive success of these loons would fall below the rate that is needed to replace themselves. And then when the adults, died off, there would simply be no more loons there. And it's the loons that will be north of the Notches or north of New Hampshire that would continue to reproduce successfully and continue to be able to maintain that viable population.
But the loons here in New Hampshire go out to the ocean. Where does the loon, say, in Minnesota go?
Yeah. So these loons in Minnesota are most likely wintering further south on the ocean. So Chris's bird count numbers have recorded the highest concentrations of loons off the North and South Carolinas, and then still good concentrations all the way down to Florida. And so for the longest time, we knew that. And you can find wintering loons from like Newfoundland all the way, down to the Gulf of Florida. But what we didn't know for a long time was where New Hampshire's loons were in that mix. And by banding these loons and by resiting some of these loons on the ocean, we now know that New Hampshire's loons typically are overwintering off the coast of Maine down to about Rhode Island. And we found a couple of stragglers that have gone a little bit further south, than that, off the coast of North Carolina, I think.
Tell the story about Kitty's Maine loon. That's fascinating.
Yes. Yeah. So, and Kitty had a number of stories. Which one was?
The one where she found the wintering loon had site-specific.
Yes.
There near the place in Maine.
Yeah. So Kitty and John's place was, where were they? Biddeford Pool. And so Kitty, being an avid photographer and an avid loon person, even in the wintertime, she wanted to see some loons. So she went down to the ocean, began to closely observe these loons and photograph the loons. And even though I don't believe one of those loons was banded, but I'm not, did she ever actually nail down exactly?
Oh, yeah.
She did. Okay. And where was that loon from then?
Pronounced Moose Lake.
Moose Lake Begunta. Okay. Lake in Maine. Right.
But she found it come back year after year.
Yes. So there is some evidence of site fidelity in loons. So it seems like they're creatures of habit when they leave here, and interestingly, there's no evidence that mated pairs go to the same place, right? And I've even heard it said that may be the key to a long marriage, separate winter vacations. But the individual loons will tend, I think, to go back to that same location. So they fall into that habit. There's that one banded loon, but there was another loon as well that Kitty could recognize because it had a look about it or behavior or something. And she was confident, even though it wasn't banded, that it was the same bird that was returning year after year after year. Yeah. So, but there's still a lot that we don't know about loons and their wintering habitat. So, yes, Kathy.
So I always worry about the loons that get tangled in fishing tackle. And
Yes.
I'm wondering if they do any characteristic behaviors when they're tangled up so that if a person is looking at it, it can tell and.
Yeah. I'm going to say no, really. But I mean, a lot of times we get reports of loons that are apparently, are trailing some tackle and they're stuck on the stick or the bottom or something because they're thrashing around and people notice a flash of color on their legs. And so they think that they're caught up in a line with a bobber and the line is stuck somewhere. And really what that is it's just one of our banded loons that's having a little preening, session because they can get into some pretty energetic, preening, and it can look for all the world like a loon in distress. So usually what we'll do is say, well, watch it, for a few minutes and call us back in a half an hour or so if it's still doing that behavior. Most of the time we do not get a call back because the loon has finished its preening and it's moving along and people relax about it. But monofilament loons that are tangled up in monofilament, it can be because of several different things. So they may actually have a hook that's embedded in like a leg or somewhere in their body. They may have swallowed a sinker or a jig and have that line coming out of their mouth. And in that case, it can wrap around their tongue. It can wrap around their throat. It can leave them unable to preen or to feed. And so that is a loon that will weaken over time. And eventually, because it's not waterproof and because it's ailing, it will pull itself out of the water on the beach. And a lot of times that's when we will get a call. And so we'll go down and we'll know and we'll see that it's on a filament loon. We'll untangle it. We will look for line going down the throat. Whether or not there's line going down the throat, we can now take an X-ray of it right on site. We can see if there's any broken bones, if there's an ingested lead sinker or lead-headed fishing jig, and then we can determine a course of action right from there. So that is one of the reasons why our portable X-ray machine has been such a huge bonus to us in doing our work and to try and save these birds.
You just have to watch how they're moving, and if they're doing something weird, then.
Yeah. And I mean, a good pair of binoculars is your friend, right? When you're with loons. And I often say, really, the only way to get close to a pair of loons on the water is with a good pair of binoculars. And if you have that, you'll often see, you could even see a hook. It's embedded in the bill or that length of line, trailing. Sometimes there's a big tangle of line and it's very obvious, but other times it can be very subtle. It's just a little length of line that's trailing. But take a good look, at that bird through binoculars. And you can usually tease that out and see if there's something happening.
Sometimes your cell phone, you can enlarge the picture.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you can, if you have a good cell phone, you can enlarge a picture sometimes too. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm on Lake Kinsaka,
Yes.
and I'm just wondering if everyone always thinks it's the same loons come every year.
Yeah.
Is there truth to that?
Yeah. Well,
We have different numbers of them.
right.
Come back to their lake.
Yeah. So, back in the day, before we were doing a lot of loon banding, the thought was, and it was a lovely thought, that loons mate for life and they come back to the same lake year after year. When we started to put bands on them, we realized that it's more complicated than that. And so many of these loons, if they're loons that are successful, many of them will tend to stay together and they'll come back to the same lake year after year after year. But if their loons are unsuccessful for some reason, or if there's an intruding loon that comes in and there's a fight and that intruding loon kicks out its counterpart. So a female will try and kick out the female of the pair. An intruding male will try and kick out the male of the pair. And often those loons, that intruding loon, once it's won that battle, it will be accepted by the remaining, loon on there, and then they will form a new pair and go on from there. And so I think I had heard a rule of thumb once that you have a complete turnover in loons every 7 years. I'm not sure if that's the case or not. 7-year itch, right, or whatever. Yeah. And you need to talk to Tiffany Grotti, our spawn biologist, because it's a soap opera out there on spawn. There's a lot of stuff going on. We have a good banded population, and Tiffany has followed some of these loons as they switched territories, switched mates, been kicked out of territories, regained territories, and it's dramatic what happens on some of these lakes.
We could make a reality show.
We probably could. Yeah. That's right. There we go. A new way to fund. Yes, yes. I bet we could manage to sell you some raffle tickets this evening. There's got to be a way to do that, I think, as I look out here. But yes, yes. Well, good, good. We'll see what we can do to make that happen. Okay. Good. Yeah.
Question about over incubation.
Yeah.
I've always thought that that term just meant that the loon stayed on the nest for too long
Mhm.
and that was dangerous. But in your presentation, it sounded that it meant more that the eggs overheated. You talked about the heat
Yeah.
and the loons leaving the nest leading to over incubation. Did I hear that
Yeah.
right? Or can you tell more
Well,
about-
so I mean, so nests could fail for a variety of different causes, right? So the eggs can be predated, or the eggs can be kicked out, and we'll find them in the water, and that's probably the reason for that cause. But some of these loons they're just sitting on these eggs, and we're counting, and you know, as day 27, 28 come up, we're saying, okay, we should have an egg, you know, hatching, and then it just never does.
Yeah.
And they can stay on those eggs. Eventually, they will abandon them. But these are eggs that fail, but not for an obvious reason. It wasn't kicked into the water, wasn't taken by a predator, wasn't crushed, wasn't cracked, or anything of that nature.
Over incubation doesn't mean.
Over
one
incubation
specific thing,
just
two of
means
them.
that they incubated long past the time when those eggs should have hatched, and they never hatched, and they're never going to hatch.
They could have cooked or frozen.
They could have cooked, they could have chilled, yeah.
Yeah, so
anything.
it's not heat, it's for some reason. Whatever.
Well,
But
we think
that might be the cause, but that's not the
yeah,
definition.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not by definition, but we think that that's responsible for some proportion of these over incubated eggs.
Thanks.
Great. All right. Well, everyone, thank you for coming. Thank you for your support. Thanks. Great, good. Yes, if anyone wants some extra copies of our annual report, they're right here. We have newsletters out here as well. And I and other staff will be here to answer other questions that you have. So, and there are books out on the porch. Good. Let's try and get more. Good.
Well,